Joining us on the line is Douglas Murray, associate editor of The Spectator, based in Britain. His latest publication is The War on the West, in which Douglas talks about how the Western cultural elite have been undermining the traditions that made the West great in the first place. Douglas, great to talk to you.
Hey, it's great to talk to you as well. I'm actually speaking to you from America.
Oh, well, that's exciting stuff. So, first of all, welcome to a temporarily freer country than Britain. I say temporarily because it seems like things are moving in the wrong direction in pretty much all of these countries. Maybe there'll be a backlash. So why don't we start with where we stand? So, I will say I have become a little bit more of an optimist about where the West is going over the course of the last year and a half, because the left has lost its mind so much that it seems like a backlash is brewing. Where do you think we are? Are you more optimistic or pessimistic than you were, say, a year and a half ago?
I'm definitely slightly more optimistic, as you are, Ben. The point I make in the War on the West is that there has been this insane attempt to war on all of our foundations in the Western democracies. A war on our religious traditions, our philosophical traditions, our historical traditions, an attempt to pull down every single one of our heroes in the West, sometimes quite literally, a war on our culture, and of course, crucially, and this is where we really get to the overreach, a war on the peoples of the West. You see, my view is that if you tried to tell any group of people in a society that they are evil from birth, that they have nothing to be proud of, that they can never escape their birth and are just to be condemned for all eternity, it would be highly unlikely that you could persuade a minority population of that. But here's the thing. When it comes to white people in the West, white people are a majority in America. They're a majority in the UK. So why would a majority agree to go along with that? Why would a majority agree to go along with what the Kennedys, D'Angelos, and others of our age are telling them, which is, if you are born white, you're born evil, you're born uniquely guilty, everybody else is a kind of saint, you're a perpetual sinner, and the best thing you can do with your life is to kind of sidle through it without anyone noticing and atoning throughout it. Like, why would a majority population go along with that? And I think the answer at some critical point is they won't. They want a more reasonable estimation of their own past, their own present, and everybody else's.
So why don't we start with, you discussed, the backlash is beginning, but why did so many people go along with this for so long? Because, again, Ibram X. Kendi is a well-respected public intellectual in the United States, despite the fact that he is neither an intellectual nor should he be well-respected. And people like Nicole Hannah-Jones and her 1619 Project have been promoted to the tunes of literally tens of millions of dollars by the New York Times. She's still an employee of the New York Times. She apparently writes maybe one piece every couple of years for them. It's pretty incredible. And not only that, you've seen all of their sort of nostrums now mirrored at the top levels of American government. You have the Biden administration openly saying things like equity should be infused in every element of what we do. And by equity, they mean Ibram X. Kendi style anti-racism, active discrimination on the basis of race. You see a Supreme Court nominee in the United States unable to explain what a woman is. So why has it worked for so long?
Well, this is one of the reasons why I'm spending my time in America at the moment, is because America is clearly the net exporter of bad ideas around the world. And I'm very sorry to say that as a very pro-American figure, and somebody who recognizes that America has been a net importer of bad ideas from the old continent in the past. It's now exporting bad ideas. You mentioned people like Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project, one of the many people that I try to take apart piece by piece at the opening of this book. Here's the thing. You just mentioned, by the way, Ben, that they're public intellectuals. I dispute that. They're private intellectuals. Why do I say that? First of all, to be a public intellectual, apart from, I agree, they're not intellectuals, but that doesn't matter. To be a public intellectual, you would have to contest your ideas in the public sphere, as you do, as I do, as many other people do, of left and right and all sorts of things. These people will never debate. Kendi will never debate, as you know. Nicole Hannah-Jones will not debate. There are many historians in the US who have picked up on all of the mistakes, the schoolgirl errors that Nicole Hannah-Jones makes. Will she debate them? Of course not. So that's one of the things, is to be a public intellectual, you'd have to actually be willing to debate your ideas in front of the public. These people aren't. Why do I also say they're private intellectuals? Because they are all wafted up through private corporations and often, sadly, public ones, but they are effectively creatures of a small type of of advancement program. In the case of Kendi, for instance, he ends up holding a chair at Boston University, only previously held by Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize-winning author of many great books like Night. Kendi has done nothing like this. Nicole Hannah-Jones, it's all about all these people get MacArthur awards. They all get university chairs, but none of them are willing to contest their ideas. So what's happened is effectively a small number of private non-intellectuals have been wafted up in America with ideas that have not been contested. But here's their advantage. They have a terrific cudgel in their hands, a bat to beat everybody with, the same remorseless weapon they consistently use, which is the charge of racism. If you don't like Nicole Hannah-Jones's work, it's not because it's sloppy, as it is. It's not because it's basically made up in parts, as it is. It's not that it's an attempt to completely rewrite the American story so that it's not a story of heroism, but one of unbelievable theft and guilt and awfulness. It's not just that. It's the fact that if you contest any of these things, they will say, you are a racist. And currently in American public life, quite understandably, nobody wants to be accused of racism. These people overuse the term and they use it against everyone and anyone who criticizes them. So they've got away with smuggling racism back into public life in the form of anti-white racism, which these people excel at.
So, Douglas, you talk in the War in the West about the institutions that have been attacked by these members of the radical left. And those institutions range from things like the ability to reason and have conversations to the church. What do you think holds all of that together? Because it really is sort of an incredible spectacle. At the same time that they are saying that we can't accept any of the traditional wisdom of the past, they're also saying we can't use reason as a guide. So you're left with pretty much nothing. I mean, you can at least make the case that the sort of rationalists of the 19th century who are anti-religion, they were anti-religion because they were rationalists. Now you have irrationalists of the 21st century who are arguing against both rationalism and also traditional religion. It's kind of amazing.
I mean, one of the things I try to demonstrate in the book is it's warred on absolutely everything. As you say, it's war. This is a war against our religious tradition and our secular tradition. So the Judeo-Christian religion comes in for assault, but so does the tradition of secularism and the Enlightenments and reason and much more. So that even, as you say, reason is said to be a white supremacist thing. So that mathematics is said to be a white supremacist thing. Correct answers are a white supremacist thing and much more. There are several answers to it, though. The first is simply that the desire is that there is nothing left in the public landscape except for this set of claims, which they've smuggled in recent years. There is nothing left to explain anything other than this new religion. As I say, the churches are basically going along with the new religion of equity, diversity, inclusion, equity. I give remorseless examples of them doing this in America and across the Western world. They've basically sold one religion to take up another, the religion of Kendiism, anti-racism, and so on. But another thing is, and as you know, there's a section in the book on what is very revealing about the people they don't do this to. Currently, everybody in our past, particularly in America, has been subjected to the same attack because of living in a time when racism existed, living in a time where slavery or colonialism existed, and using words or playing with ideas that we would not use today. Well, here's the thing, as I say in one section of the book, look at Karl Marx. Karl Marx, as I show, in his private and public writings, was a vicious racist by contemporary standards, of course, a vicious anti-Semite. He was appalling views on slavery, colonialism, and much more. Only last year, a new statue to Karl Marx went up in Germany, paid for by the Chinese Communist Party, it should be mentioned. So why don't we do this with Marx? Well, I think there's a very revealing truth here, which is that one of the things that has been going on is that people want to tear down every hero, except, for instance, for Karl Marx, because they think he's going to be useful as he would be, with them trying to smuggle back in the same reprehensible project they spent the last century and more trying to smuggle into American life. So they don't bring down Marx like they brought down Thomas Jefferson for the same reasons, because they say, oh no, well, we're not interested in it with him because he's a figure we admire. Well, here's something. We admire Jefferson. We admire Washington. We admire Lincoln. We don't look to these people for their views on race. We look to them and admire them because of their extraordinary foresight, their heroism, their ability to come up with greatest country on earth. I mean, in the case of the founding fathers, we don't look to them because we want to look at their private letters and see where they once referred to slaves. So I think we reveal an enormous amount in the fact that this unbelievable, remorseless exercise is done on everyone, except for a few far leftist heroes. Well, I think we should play it at them as well. If you want to play the context of your time thing, sure. Well, that relates to everybody.
We're talking with Douglas Murray. His latest book is The War on the West. It is out this week. So Douglas, what form do you think the backlash is going to take? There are a couple of forms that have sort of been put out there. One is the sort of John Stuart Mill, classical liberal, libertarian form where everybody just basically goes weapons down. We all leave each other alone. You live your life. I live my life. And it seems like that is now taking a backseat to an almost more traditionally conservative, European conservative feel, which is you guys are not going to go weapons down. We don't trust you to go weapons down. And so we are going to start using some of your own methods against you until you either surrender or, in the case of some, I would say, more passionate advocates of this position, they say that even in a vacuum, we would use these sort of arguments. So to take sort of a fixed point, well, what's happening in Florida right now with regard to Disney? There are a few arguments, really interesting arguments, I think, happening on the right over this. There's some classical liberals who say, no, Disney should be able to say what it wants to say, and Ron DeSantis should basically leave them alone. Then there are people like me, and I've taken the position this is mutually assured destruction. The left has basically weaponized corporate America against all of these traditional institutions, and they've done so through government regulations and government laws, and they've done so over the course of decades. And so I'm not happy with going after corporations for speech. But the speech that Disney had wrung out of it by the Democrat media complex was not speech that Disney even wanted to do in the first place. And so if there's no incentive structure created on the other side, then there must be an incentive structure on the other side so we can go back to status quo ante. And then there are the people who are sort of the more passionate European-style conservatives who say, well, even if the left weren't pushing this, we should basically punish corporations for types of speech that we don't like because they're tearing away at the social fabric. What form of backlash do you think is going to be most likely here?
No, I think to take the case of Florida, it's a very useful example. I don't actually think that what DeSantis has done is in any way wrong, because the fact is, as you know, Ben, that Disney was enjoying advantages in Florida already. So if a particular corporation enjoys tax and other advantages in a state and then uses its position to level political allegations that are flat out false against that state, I think that the state has the right to take away the advantages that Disney owns. If there were any other company that did it, you'd say the same, I think. I don't see why a bakery or anything else that enjoyed a particular status advantage and then decided to become a political activist and war against the government of a state should in any way be given a kind of, or be allowed to retain an advantage because of it. As you mentioned, these entities have become political actors. So it's perfectly reasonable to say, we would like to have a public square where large entertainment corporations and so on did not become political actors. But if you do, there's a price to pay for it. Now, I would prefer it if that was a reputational price that was basically ground up. But, as I have done, if I see and it happened to me the other day with a streaming service, they said, if you want to upgrade to Disney, it's only $5 a month. Click here. I said, it's the easiest damn decision of the year for me. I do not want Disney's content. I didn't really want it very much. Anyway, I really don't want it now. I think the same thing as we know is happening with Netflix. Just it's gone intolerably woke in one direction, and I'm just not interested in it anymore. The subscription cancellation, beckons. But that's where I'd prefer it to come from. I prefer it to be a bottom-up approach, and just the market expresses itself. But where there are, as I say with Disney, unfair market advantages already, I see no reason why government shouldn't take advantage of them. It goes back to where we started from in a way. This thing of private individuals who get wafted up. I don't know why the New York Times thinks it has the right to rewrite the date of America's founding, but it thinks it does. I'm very happy to have that debate out in the public square. As I say, the authors of that are not. It's the New York Times' position. They should be able to argue that position. They have the right to argue that position. I also think the American people have the right to ignore them as a result. That's where I'd like it to happen. But as I say, there are cases like Disney where there's a clear advantage already. They've become political actors, and politicians shouldn't be shy about responding in kind. What we do with the legacy media in relation to that, I think, is another question, because effectively, legacy media and the platforms like Twitter are now in a sort of death match. Again, The problem is we have institutions that are not what they say they are. Twitter pretends to be the public square, except that it isn't. Instagram pretends to be the public square. It isn't. These are so. I do think there's a backlash. I think I would like to see it reasonable, and most of all, I would like to see it as a backlash, not of one side trying to kill and hurt the other, but a recognition that we all have to live in the same country. We all have to be able to get along at some level, and the best level to get along at is to have some common understanding about our past. And in the case of America, it is, if you decide to fundamentally rewrite our past, we will not go along with that. And I think there are plenty of moderate Democrats that agree with that position. We can agree to relitigate slavery as if the United States has never done this before. We can agree to that and have a reasonable discussion about what was known and what wasn't. What is not tolerable is to lie about the country, lie about the founding figures of the country. And in the war in the West, I keep catching out these figures for doing this. Nicole Hannah-Jones and her colleagues lie about the founders of this country. Abraham X. Kendi, as he calls himself, I catch him out in his book. He lies about Thomas Jefferson. He doesn't know this because he hasn't even read the letter that he refers to clearly, as he shows from his sourcing. But I don't think these people should be allowed to get away with lying about this country, because that's what causes the division. As surely as it would if the right invented a new form of history about America, or pretended that slavery had never existed, or something like that. The reasonable position of a country is to be able to look at itself in the round. The radical left wants to push a view on America, that is not a view of American history in the round. It says only America did slavery. Flat out false. Everybody in the world was doing slavery. The biggest slave trade, as I say in the book, the biggest slave trade was not the transatlantic slave trade. It was the slave trade of people being taken east from Africa, the Arab slave trade. You know why nobody knows about the Arab slaves, among other things? Because the 18 million people taken to the Arab countries, the males were all castrated. That was actually a genocide. That was going on whilst America and European countries were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. So these people who try to force a false narrative on America of America's own alleged sins are pushing a story that is unfair, uneven, unequal, totally unrepresentative, totally lacking in context. And they are telling the American people that America is not uniquely good, but uniquely evil. That is flat out false. And it's high time these people were pushed back against.
Well, the book, again, is The War on the West. Douglas Murray is the author. Douglas, final question for you. You look at the way that the left has been reacting to the backlash against it, and they seem like they are just really walled off in their echo chamber. They seem completely unable to grasp the fact that a lot of Americans just are not into this. Joe Biden entered office with a 60-some% approval rating. He's down to the low 30s now, and yet he can't seem to shift course. And it seems like the left, this is true nearly across the board, the left seems unable in France, in Britain, nearly anywhere to shift course, to kind of course correct here. So what do you think that bodes?
I think they hoped that they wouldn't have to go to the public with their ideas. I actually think this was the crucial flaw in their plan. I say this about the critical race theory hucksters. They generated this idea, as you well know, Ben. They generated this idea in universities. They came up with these ludicrous, unworkable claims. They're not theories; they're just claims. And the fantastic thing about it is it didn't outlive its first meeting with the public. American parents found out that their children were being told that if you're white, you're evil. That theory may have worked when Kimberly Crenshaw and co were working it out on American campuses. Didn't work when you tried to shove it onto school children and kindergartners. Didn't work on its first meeting with the American public. So this is a very useful thing. The radical left worked on all of these theories, including the equity stuff. It doesn't work whenever it actually meets the general public. That is a fantastic sign for optimism. They are going to continue to try to maintain this cathedral of holy ideas that they have erected. And they're going to try to keep pushing it. And they will try to find ways that circumvent the public so that they will have commissions on equity. They will try to, as the Biden administration has, look at things like reparations without having to go to the public with the actual horrible, monstrous idea they're trying to impose on us. So I think their hope is they don't have to confront the public. My great hope, and I think our great hope, is that the public does feel confronted and that the public has a much bigger voice than this minority of radical activists. The crucial thing is that the majority, that the public need to be armed with the facts when they meet these hucksters and these extremists. And that's one of the things I try to do in my book. Got to arm the public with the facts that correctly portray our own history, our own past, and our own reason to feel pride in it.
And that's Douglas Murray. His book is The War on the West. Douglas, congratulations on the book again. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.